Hey guys, welcome back to Trade Talk. This is episode 14, and I'm your host, Niko. Thank you for tuning back in. To anybody who's been checking back week to week as I put these out, I really appreciate it. I got a lot of listens on my last episode, actually, which was a manga specific episode, more so than usual. So if you ended up checking back again, thank you for that. And, I hope you continue to come take a listen. If you're looking for more manga specific conversation, then I don't read as many manga as I do Western comics, but it's definitely something I am interested in and that I will be reading time to time. So thanks again to everybody who has checked in with us so far and listened. All right, so today I got 3 different titles I wanted to talk about today. I actually didn't do this on purpose, but I guess a couple of the titles are more kind of like, I guess, more spooky, kind of good for the month of October, it being Halloween and whatnot, and more better suited for that. And yeah, I was maybe planning on reading some more specific reads that are going to be geared towards horror in the next week or two to put out around the time of Halloween for you guys. So still look forward to that. But yeah, I guess this is you can add these in as well. This, for whatever reason, I didn't plan it this way, but it just worked out. So I basically almost reread the series Ghosted. This is written by Joshua Williamson. Every volume is kind of drawn by a different artist, and we'll get into that. It started off with Goran Suzuka's art, which I'm a big fan of. Then in the next 2 volumes, volumes 2 and 3, had David Gianfelice, who I didn't realize until after the fact is the artist on Oblivion Song. That's the current Robert Kirkman book. And then there was a few different artists on the last volume. I think Goran Suzuka even came back. Juan Jose Rip drew one of the chapters. Vladimir Kristic Lacey drew one of the chapters. Goran Suzuka drew the last chapter. So yeah, so mostly it was this Lacey guy who drew most of these issues, with the other 2 people doing 1 issue each. And right off the bat, I'll actually say that is one problem I had with this book. Reading it in its entirety is the changing art styles. Sometimes it works, it doesn't bother me, more so in my superhero comics, just because of the nature of the beast over there is that they normally have an artist on for an arc, and then while that artist may be catching up and drawing the next arc, they rotate another artist in, or they sometimes get 2 artists whose styles are somewhat similar on the book to complement one another. Usually in these image books or these creator-owned books, though, I like to have the same creative team throughout. I mean, I know sometimes that's not always feasible, and depending on how the book works out. Like in Ghosted, for instance, I believe this was first announced as just a mini-series, because I remember picking up some of the issues when this series had started, and that's why I said I've read some of it before, but now I read it in its entirety. So I read maybe just over this first arc, and I think it was first publicized as a miniseries, if I'm not mistaken, and then I guess it was popular enough that they made it an ongoing. And, Joshua Williamson, this definitely wasn't his first book he had written, but this is earlier in his career before he made the move to DC, until he started writing some DC books, making a bigger name for himself, even before some of the other titles that he's more well known for through Image, like Nailbiter kind of hit and all that. There was this Ghosted series. And the premise of this series, in this first volume, was very interesting to me and intriguing. Is basically, I mean, the easy pitch that you can make for this is that it is Ocean's 11 meets, I guess like some sort of on the book, I just looked at it. It says The Shining, which I guess you could say that, but it is essentially like a horror story, like one of those ones where people go to a haunted house. But in this sense, he goes there with a bunch of thieves that are there to steal a ghost. Like that's the whole mission of this Ghosted story, and that's why our main character in this book goes there is to successfully steal a ghost out, because he's in prison. He's busted out of prison by some rich dude who propositions him into doing this for him, puts him in this position. And then he's like, okay, well then I'll pick my team because I don't want to go back to jail. And so he agrees to let him pick his team, and he picks like a bunch of weird different types of people that he thinks can pull this job off. And it goes back to when he tried to pull off this huge heist, like I guess like something like Ocean's 11 style. His whole team apparently got killed in this place that they went to that turned out to be haunted, and then he was the only one that ended up getting arrested. But then the book's called Ghosted because since then he's had to live with this, and he's got like literal ghosts he feels like hanging over his shoulder, like watching over him, like he's a man that people don't want to be around because bad things happen. This kind of aspect to it, like he's haunted, you know what I mean, like haunted because of the events that happen in his life. And then kind of from there, after this first arc, to be honest, it kind of spiraled out. I was really looking forward to reading this whole thing. I had picked up the trades. I never got around to finishing the series. But I didn't love it, if I'm being completely honest. And I am a big fan of Joshua Williamson. I like some of the artists on this. Like I said, I think Goran Suzuka started off the book. That was, again, I think it was just supposed to be this one arc of 6 issues or 5 issues. 5 issues the first volume collects. Was great. Then after that, the kind of quality goes down from there. David Gianfelice, which I talked about on the Oblivion Song book not too long ago, I believe, on this show, whose style I dig now. This, you could tell, is definitely earlier work by him. Like, he's still trying to kind of find his feet. Not everything is as well developed as it is now with his style. It's looking a little bit more loose, or just not as good for whatever reasons, but it was okay. But then when you got to the last volume and you got like 3 different artists on the last arc, even though like there were some good artists there, like Juan Jose Rip, I love his art. He's an acquired taste, and I know what not everybody likes him. He did a lot of stuff for Avatar, but I guess more recently for Marvel he did some Moon Knight stuff. And it's a story told in a different time, so it worked. I think it worked well. And then for the last issue, you had Goran Suzuka come back for the book, which I think, like I said, he was the best artist on this title. But then this other artist, this Lacey that they had in between all of this, wasn't that great. So it was kind of like a sliding scale. And because, like I said, with a lot of these independent books, like I like this creative team kind of locked in to kind of give this book a certain vision, because like, listen, this is a 20 issue series that a creator is telling. This isn't a superhero comic. No one else is going to come in here and tell this anything that like a new writer is not going to jump on Ghosted after he leaves. So I just thought for these things you kind of need to keep your team intact, I think. So yeah, the art definitely was a big downer for me. And then to get into the story, it's kind of like all over the place. Like every arc, it's kind of like similar in the sense like he moves on from one situation to the next that he keeps getting stuck in, and he keeps running into people from his past that he knows and that he's had troubles with in the past, and how they're connected, and how every time somehow he gets involved in some sort of supernatural thing where he's needed to do something that he doesn't want to do, but he's kind of being forced into it because of the situations. And, I can just tell this is, reading this, it's definitely, even for Joshua Williamson, this is one of his earlier works, and I think that he wasn't as great a writer at this point in time. I just felt if it stopped at the first arc, and it was just that arc, then I think I would have liked this a lot more, but maybe it's because he wasn't prepared to keep writing this series after that. Maybe it's because he just ran out of his best ideas after that first arc, after that initial arc. Because after that it just wasn't that great. So yeah, Ghosted isn't bad. If you're into Joshua Williamson's writing, I would have a hard time even recommending that, just because it's not his best work. But if you're a completist, if you like to sample everybody's work, even the earlier stuff, you can check this out. Maybe if you're a fan of some of the artists I mentioned, you can. But just know, like I said, it changes every other arc for the most part. And and if you're a fan of the ghost stories or heist stories, you might find something to like about this. But it wasn't my favorite, and I might end up getting rid of these paperbacks now as a result. I'm disappointed because, like I said on the show before, I don't come out here and set out to like shit on books, but there's, you're not going to connect it with everything, you're not going to love everything, but this is one that because I had read a little bit of it before, I had thought that I was going to really end up enjoying, and it just didn't it didn't pan out that way for me. Okay, so next up we got A Walk Through Hell, Volume 2. This is written by Garth Ennis, art by Goran Suzuka. I just realized that. Oh, man. I mean, I do that, but again, I didn't realize I was going to be talking about both of these books on the same show. So, yeah, Goran Suzuka, who I said was the best artist on Ghosted, looked great in this. I mean, this has been some years since he drew Ghosted, but I think his style is still very much the same. I did enjoy it. Very clean line art style. I think he also did some Wonder Woman, the Brian Azzarello run, when Cliff Chang wasn't drawing it. I believe he did some issues to that. Yeah, it's very clean line. Everybody kind of looks. It's kind of very slick looking. Not too stylistic, but everything's kind of not very much detail. Not a lot of backgrounds in this. It's good, serviceable art. He knows how to play with the inks when he needs to. There's nothing wrong with his art style. I do enjoy it, but it's not like he's not at the top of my list of my favorite artists either. But but he's good. So this is the second volume that came out through Aftershock Comics. This is one of the other smaller publishers. They've had a lot of good creators going to work for them, and Garth Ennis has been one of those creators, and he's brought a few different projects to them over his time, I guess, working for them last couple of years. And this one is kind of like, I would say, like a psychological horror of sorts. It starts out with this. So this collects issues 6 through 12. This collects the last arc of the series. This finishes out the series. The first volume, I guess, is the first 5 issues. And it starts out with a bunch of cops that go into a warehouse, and then once they get into the warehouse, it's not what it seems. Like, they start going crazy, and one of them ends up killing himself, and then it's like almost like they have walked into hell without knowing it. And that, like, whatever they basically went into this warehouse to track down, I guess, this killer. But then it kind of goes tits up, so to speak, very quickly for these people, to the point where there's people stuck inside the building and they don't know like how to get out, and they get lost, and then they have to end up having flashbacks of like horrible moments in their lives and coming to terms with their issues, and like I said, like slowly they get killed, or like something bad happens to them in this building and they get taken off the map, and then this group of detectives that went in there together, slowly is dwindling down. And I think in the first volume they lose one of their partners, and then the other two main characters of this book that we followed in the first volume, a woman and a man cop, I'm blanking on their names right now, you follow them through the rest of this second volume. And I'm a huge fan of Garth Ennis. Again, I don't think this is his best work. Horror is something, I've tried a couple of things from him that he's done. There's been horror elements in some of his stuff, of course. That's been fine. But I think just straight up horror, like this kind of psychological horror that he's doing here, it didn't appeal to me as some of his more dark humor type books, I would say. It wasn't bad. I'm having trouble explaining exactly what occurred to the characters in this volume. It's a little bit unclear. It seems like they come to realize that this killer guy that they're after, I guess this guy that killed kids, or he either killed or molested kids, like he's a horrible, horrible human being. And they met him through the first volume, and you find out the woman cop had some like terrible interaction with this man, and that's the guy I think they end up, or at least he ends up making it seem like he appears to be when they actually come to face with him in this volume. They, after like, you know, being lost and not knowing where the fuck they are, and all these weird occurrences that occur in the first volume. In the second one, they track down, I guess, somebody that they're looking for. It turns out to be this guy, or at least he appears in the form of this guy. And then the guy who's speaking to them, that she's had issues with, this person in the case, it turns out like he's like what it seems to be the devil, like he's Satan, and he's just making himself to look like this person, to have this conversation with them. Like there's a, like he turns into this huge monster at the end, and it's never super clear who he is, but like, you know, it seems that he's the devil and that they are through hell, hence the name, A Walk Through Hell, but it's never flat out told to you. It's something that you kind of have to work for or interpret your own way. So that is why it left me wanting, in a sense, by the end of this. While it was an intriguing and interesting read throughout at times, it just didn't really stick the landing for me as a complete 12-issue run on a title. So yeah, so that's kind of how I felt about this. I don't regret reading it. I don't think it's bad, but I think there's better, and there's definitely better from Garth Ennis. And yeah, like I said, I think the main thing is I didn't regret reading it. It was fine. I just, again, it's not my favorite thing, and it was just okay in my opinion. So, you know, if you can track this down cheap or borrow it from a library or a friend or something like that, then I would do that. I wouldn't go all in and purchase these full price, both these volumes. So yeah, that's my opinion on this series. And last but not least, we have Silencer Volume 3. Out of these 3 books, this was the one I enjoyed the most, believe it or not. You may not know who the Silencer is. She was a newly created character as part of like the that spun out of Dark Knight's Metal. There was a few series that spun out of Dark Knight's Metal, which I think Terrifics might be the only one that is still going on right now. Jeff Lemire left the book, and then Lun Yang joined the book after him, and I believe he's still writing it. I think it's gone probably over 20 issues at this point. Unless he was just coming on the book to close it out after Lemire left, because I think he wrote like the first 3 trade paperbacks, 15, 16 issues or something like that. This collects Silencer 13 to 18. And if you haven't checked out this book yet or know nothing about it, because, like, admittingly, I don't think a lot of those books did very well that spun out of it, because it was, like, books like Damage and New Challengers, and it was one of those things where what they did is they tried to put the artist first, like, when these books came out, like, even on the head, like, usually how they put the writer and then the artist's name, for all of these titles, they put the artist's name first and then the writer. So this was written by Dan Abnett, but they put the artist of this volume, V. Ken Marion, who I gotta admit I'm not too familiar with their work, first on the actual comic issues and on the trade paperback. So they were trying to put their artists first and highlight the artists of these series because they were artistic directions and mostly new characters or characters that they were reintroducing. So it was an interesting way of going about it. I think the thought process behind it, because they did this in light of, at the time, I remember Marvel was getting a lot of bad press for basically saying that, I think there was a comment made by one of their executives saying that, like, you know, people check out books for, like, the characters or the writer. They don't necessarily follow the artist. So then I think in response, DC, when they announced this line, they were putting the artist first. So it's kind of just like almost like a big fuck you to Marvel. And these are the only titles they ended up doing that with. It's not like they've been doing that on all their titles. So, yeah, and every volume of this also was a different artist. So it started out with John Romita Jr., who I'm a huge fan of. And then the second artist, I think, was Victor Bogdanovic, who did a great job. Actually, I ended up enjoying him quite a bit on the book. He kind of has like a style similar, I would say, closest to like a Greg Capullo. He's like a Greg Capullo light in a sense. Like his style very much looks like him, though. Like his facial work and like kind of the way he draws people. And then the weird thing is, and then I felt this artist, V. Ken Marion, who I'm not familiar with, similarly has a Victor Bogdanovic style. it's almost like a sliding scale. Like, I wouldn't say he looks as much like Greg Capullo, but I think he at times looks definitely like Victor Bogdanovic. So it's it's definitely interesting, and yeah. So I enjoyed the art, actually. All three. See, here's one example where the superhero book, like I was saying earlier, I don't like sometimes when they switch up the artists a lot. They had somewhat similar styles on each of these arcs, and it is a superhero comic, but they made it work. It worked for whatever reason. It did not bother me in this, in this situation. But yeah, this was a good book. I'm a fan of Dan Abnett's writing, and this was an interesting new character that they introduced that spun out of Dark Knight's Metal, who is essentially John Wick. Like, the Silencer has the power to put up like a force field of silence, like almost like a bubble of silence around her, and then she's like super good at, like, like being a hitman or a hitwoman, essentially. She can come in, put the silencer on, and basically silence her kills and silence her weapons as a result, and manipulate her powers to do other funky things to people around her, or to improve her combat situations in any situation that she gets into. And she works for Talia, or she worked for Talia, and then she walked away from Talia to resume a normal life and actually get married and have a kid and step away from the life. But then there comes a point in time where the organization that she worked for comes back to haunt her, and then Talia comes out of the shadows and reemerges and needs her to join her fight again, because Leviathan is in trouble, and there's like all these people flipping sides, and it's time for her to come back into the fold. And there's times where she's working alongside Talia in this because she's forced to, or working for her, or when she's getting attacked by her, until she agrees to come work for her again. So there's kind of a lot of double crossing and stuff going on in this book in that sense. And remind you of anything? John Wick. Like, the first volume, there's even like places that she goes to buy the guns, and people that she knows in like underground kind of situations that she's privy to, because she's one of these assassins that used to work for Talia. And it's one of those things where she thought she got out, but she didn't get out. You can never get out. You're this good of an assassin, so of course she's gonna hit you up when she needed to. She's just let you have a family for a few years. So that's one of those things. Oh, I gotta dig up my guns. I don't think that happens, but one of those things where it felt the first volume especially felt like fucking you were watching a different version of John Wick, where the main character is a woman, and she's in the DC universe, and she used to work for Talia al Ghul. So, and it's, in a way, it's like a Batman adjacent book because of the Talia tie-in. Although I don't think he ever appears in this. It's not. Don't think of it in that sense, like it's happening in Gotham, But yeah, in a way, they were trying to kind of work her into the fold of the main DC universe for a newly established character. I think in that sense, they did a good job by introducing this character that way. So you feel that she's always kind of been around, even though she hasn't been around. She kind of moved off the playing field for a bit because of her current situation. So for a newly established character, it worked out very well in actually introducing her and saying that that's everything that went on, and this is why the reason maybe you don't know her, or to give her ties to other characters that we do know, right? So it worked very well in that sense. So the art was good, the story was interesting, action-packed, moved at a very good, fast clip every arc. A lot of action, great character development. I think for a new character, it's a new character. It's interesting. It felt like John Wick. So yeah, I mean, for all those reasons, I just thought this was a very good under the radar book that I don't think a lot of people checked out, or may have not given a chance to. Because they didn't know who she was, or because it was one of these spin-off books. I don't think that were all that successful, but very, very well done and a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it. So you should definitely check this out. Just check out, even the first volume. I'm sure it's like a $15 trade retail. But if you like what you read in that one, it just kind of continues that, I think, the same quality throughout, in terms of like a fast-paced action adventure with a new character. So if you're interested in any of that, definitely check this book out. And I think maybe you can find it on the cheap somewhere, because maybe it's on some discount bin somewhere. I can't this book couldn't have been that popular just because like it's so hard to introduce new characters, especially things that come out of a spin-off like this, and have them stick. I actually didn't pick it up initially, and then I heard another reviewer somewhere talking about it, and it piqued my interest. I mean, initially it was for the John Wick kind of ness of it and how it sounded similar, but I think it greatly separated itself from that initial kind of idea of like this is just like a John Wick person in the DC universe. Like, so a lot of the ideas felt like it was like that at first, but then I think the the story moved along at an enjoyable pace and went to different places I didn't expect it to. So yeah, The Silencer, definitely check that out. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, as always. As I mentioned, this is podcast as part of the Late Night Chat network of podcasts. We are now also on YouTube. I don't have any comic content on there as of yet, but my main podcast I do with my co-host JT, Late Night Chat with JT and Niko, is on there. It might interest you, but if you're just here for the comic talk, then I understand. As well as we got Weekly Wine Comic Time. That's the weekly show I do with my girlfriend. That podcast is also here on SoundCloud on the Late Night Chat network, and that's where we talk about the weekly new comic releases, single issues. So if you're a weekly reader as opposed to a trade waiter, then yeah, you can also check that out. Or if you just ever want to get an opinion on one of the current books, that when it's collected, if it sounds interesting to you, it's definitely worth checking out. All right, thanks a lot, guys. See you next time.